Welcome to the special YouTube edition of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. I am joined by Metal Sludge founder and Tuff lead singer Stevie Rachelle. We talk about the band's latest projects as well as the Guns N' Roses reunion tour. The latest Skid Row news. Is Sebastian Bach coming back? We also discuss Bobby Blotzer and his version of Ratt and a lot more. Stay tuned. Here is Stevie Rachelle. Welcome to the special YouTube edition of One-on-One with Mitch Lafon. Sitting across from me is lead singer of Tuff, Stevie Rachelle. Good day, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Mitch, and everybody in the Great White North?
Yes, wonderful Canada, where we went from 18 Celsius and green grass to snow overnight, which is
Yeah, I saw some photos of, relatives and friends on Facebook just in the last 24 hours in Wisconsin, and it's like the snow drifts are, waist high, and good luck to them.
Good luck to them, but we are obviously not here for the weather report, so let's get right into this. You have got some new albums that are out, or that you're plugging here. So we've got Tuff, the Glam Years from 85 to 89, and then you've got this beauty here, Decadation, a beautiful vinyl which you were kind enough to send me a signed version of. So let's start with that, and then we'll get into the history of all that, and then we'll also start talking about Metal Sludge, which is the website that for years you ran anonymously, but now run very what's the opposite of anonymously? Very out in the open, let's say that.
Out in the open, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about these Tuff products here. Tell me the history of the Glam Years. What's the story on that CD?
Well, 2015 is actually the 30-year anniversary of the band Tuff. Not since I've been in the band, because I didn't join the band until the summer of 87.
Right.
But Todd Chase on bass, and George DeSaint, the guitarist, they formed this band literally on like New Year's Eve, 84, 85. It was the end of 84, coming out of high school, and early 85 that they were like, we're going to form Tuff. Now, previous to this, they played in a couple of different bands together and separately. Not everybody knows this, but George actually played with Jason Newsted for a short time in a band called Metal Beast. Now, this is pre-Flotsam and Jetsam and clearly pre-Tuff. And Todd, as some know and some might not know, he comes from a bloodline of metalheads. I mean, his brother Kenny Chason was in Keel for all those years. His other brother, Greg Chason, is from Badlands. So Todd and George kind of grew up more metalheads than anything. And they played all these, they were playing in friends with Icon and Surgical Steel, and I think at that point Rob Halford had already lived in the Arizona area, Phoenix. Sacred Reich was forming, a lot of metal there. But Mötley Crüe, changed everybody's opinion when it went from Wasp-esque blood, devil, studs, leather, spikes to Smoking in the Boys' Room became a little glammy. And that's when Tuff became the glam band that they were. So they played around with Jim Gillette for a couple years, released an EP, eventually moved to LA, played a handful of shows at the Troubadour and the Country Club and Gazzari's, but it just didn't work. Jim wanted to go heavier, and the guys wanted to stay in the glam rock, party kind of vibe. And so that's why I basically unearthed the original, as we see it here, the Glam Years, the original Jim Gillette recordings, which they did a half dozen, put out an EP in 86. I believe they mixed it at the infamous Baby O Studios, which was kind of a, place to go and record in Hollywood or whatever in that time period. But the stuff never went anywhere. And then eventually I came in the band and we did demos, one of which was at Sound City, in 1988, one of which was at Sunset Sound Factory in 89. And so with it being the 30th anniversary, I was like, let me put together some projects. These are not officially re-releases, but the Glam Years is just that. The Glam Years of 1985 to 89 when Tuff was at its glammest. And it's a great package. We got a little booklet here, and it's a two-sided booklet. It's got a Jim Gillette era, and then it's got a Stevie Rachelle era. And it's all the glam stuff. And at the same time, because the vinyl has become such a craze, everybody says, "Oh, Tuff should put out a vinyl record. I want a vinyl record." And eventually I thought, well, we're not going to re-release anything, but let's make a special item. So that's where I came up with the idea to put out Decadation. And for the diehards, they'll know that Tuff did a release called Decade of Disrespect, and we also did a record called Regurgitation. These were kind of compilations of demos and live tracks and rare recordings. And I took the best sounding demos from the Decade record and the best sounding demos from the Regurgitation record, combined it to basically release this package called Decadation. That's where the title comes from. And then in putting it together, instead of it being side A and side B, we have side 1988 and side 1989, which, you know, to go with that, the recordings were from 1988 and 89. And of course, you know, classic era photos and images from Niels Lozauer, which were also from 1989. So it was a whole little piece, and not a lot of people got to have Tuff on vinyl. A few might have found this on eBay, as it was, you know, our debut. Only released in Europe, though, and it was never an official North American or US release. So now they want one, they can buy Decadation. How's that for an answer? I think I lost you, Mitch.
No, you didn't. I'm here.
Just listening to me babble.
Talking to myself as I sometimes do. But where can fans find that? Is it just on the Tuff website, or is that on Amazon and all that wonderful stuff?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on eBay. You know, getting it into the stores, it's kind of a laughable, you know, way to put things. There's not a lot of stores to even buy records at. I mean, so I'd say most people buy things online. There is some, you know, old-fashioned record stores that exist in various cities and towns across America, but a small indie release like this, you know, chasing down and putting 5 records here and 3 there, and it's just a lot of work. Not that I haven't done that work, because I have in the past with indie releases, but it, you know, people can go on Amazon or eBay right now today, pay a couple of dollars difference in shipping, and they'll have it at their door in 48 hours. I mean, if somebody lives in the greater Los Angeles or Southern California area, it's like, I could mail it today, they might have it tomorrow. So, and
without all the traffic and the hassle.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, it's kind of a novelty piece. I mean, I've had people say to me, like, why are you putting that out? Like, who's going to play that? And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. Being that you're a Kiss fan, You'll get it. How many grown men have bought a Kiss lunchbox and actually used it? How many 45 or 50-year-old men have a Kiss lunchbox and put their sandwich in it in the morning and go to fucking work with it? None.
Go to the construction site, right? Exactly.
None. It's sitting on their desk in their office, and they're in a suit and tie and whatever they do, and then their friend comes to their office and they're getting ready to go to lunch, and they're like, dude, check it out. I just got it in the mail today. And they're reliving when they were 12 and had it with a thermos, and they went to school and had a ding-dong and a Twinkie and a bag of Cheetos in there. Same thing with this. This is not for everybody to put on their vinyl record player and play. It's you know, it's a keepsake. It's a novelty item. It's something that when I play the live shows now, you know, just looking at it is, I mean, and I went out of my way to make this nice. We put a great insert in here, 2-sided, and we have not only, it's a side 1988, it's got all the information, all these flyers that are shown on here are actual flyer replications from shows in 1988. And on side 1989, the same, including, you know, an actual photo image of the 2-inch Ampex 456 tape that was used to record. So, you know, all the credits show, like, who was our roadies, who did our hair and makeup, and all the things that really mattered in 1989 are detailed in this record. So, you got $20, help put ding-dongs and Cheetos in my kids' lunch boxes for the next couple of years, find it online. And when people say, I can't find you online, hammer to your face, okay? If you have a computer...
You have Google.
There's 1,000 social networks. Well, not 1,000, but I mean, we're on everything. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and eBay and Amazon and, they're out there. So it's 30 years of Tuff. We released a couple of cool projects that are cool for fans to have. And
there you go. So
there we go.
Let me also move on from Tuff for a second, because it's a long history, but there's also Metal Sludge. Here's a site that came out in probably 96?
98. Summer of 98.
Okay, and it was this mysterious site that had all this information that time and time again was proven to be true and somewhat salacious and somewhat embarrassing for some.
Yep.
What was the concept behind that? Was it just to have a website to make money? Was there a certain anger? Was it retribution? Was it just for fun? I mean, was it... What was the whole...
First of all, more than anything, the latter. Money, here's, I can say this. Over the years, Metal Sludge has brought in excess of $1 million, maybe a couple million.
Wow.
But in the summer of 1998, I didn't know what the fucking internet was. I didn't know what a .com was or a JPEG or a GIF file. I mean, I knew none of that. All I knew is that people were getting computers, people were going online, magazines were dying, and the ones that were out were just full of Limp Bizkit and Marilyn Manson and Powerman 5000.
And fluffy stories, too. I mean, it was how nice the guitarist was, or how cute the lead singer was.
And so there's a few things that, it was absolutely fun. Now, when you say retribution or anger, there was absolutely the initial kick that got me to create this website. I've said this before. It was based on me inviting Jerry Miller from Metal Edge to one of my shows, and I heard from a very close friend of both of ours that Jerry had some not so pleasant things to say about me or the show. I think I was playing a show with Kip Winger, and it was when everybody was going solo and acoustic, and and she just said something like, "Oh, those guys, why are they even doing it? It's over. Like, why bother?" Like, it was just matter-of-factly the way she said it, but I took offense to it. I was pissed, and I thought, how fucking dare you? And at that point, I was like, I'm going to create a website, and I'm going to call it Metal Sludge, and I'm just going to, we're going to destroy things, like it was kind of like off the top of my head, but it was also that light bulb that when it went off, I was just blinded to everything else other than we're going to create this cool website. And the guy I did it with was Sean Card from Michigan, a friend of mine. He had been on the road with us.
He worked with Lit, didn't he?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I introduced him to Lit. I sent him to the show with his video camera, and I told the guys, hey, he's coming down. And this was even before Lit had...
Any success, right?
Yeah, well, they had already had success, and they were great guys, but their single hadn't blown up. But so anyways, we just started, spitballing back and forth what we wanted to do. We both loved Howard Stern. We both loved Saturday Night Live. So we're like, yeah, let's do, he said, let's do a 20 questions like Playboy. They'd have that beautiful girl, they ask 30 questions every month. And then we had these ideas of just goofing on and doing parodies of stuff kind of like Saturday Night Live would, and, we love Stern, who was always busting people's balls. And, I remember...
You still love Stern because he's gone a little soft.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's had to change to an extent. I mean, he's as big as you can be, and, being on all these corporate shows, he can't come out and be the complete whack pack on America's Got Talent or whatever. I mean, he's just... But, so... We just started throwing these ideas together, and we came up with the idea to do the Hair Club for Men chart, which was like, hey, let's talk about guys that are wearing wigs or extensions, and who's going bald, which included me. Hey, I got to make it on the chart as well. And then it was like the penis chart. It was always groupies talking about who was good and bad or had a big wiener, and so we just started compiling these things, and the top 10 list. Which was from David Letterman. I loved David Letterman's top 10 list. So we just started coming up with top 10 reasons why Jackal sucks, or, something just, and it would be something about the chainsaw and lumberjacks. And again, there was really no ill will meant to any of these guys, but I absolutely wanted to kick some guys up the ass. And I also wanted to give some props to guys that were out there just killing themselves for $500 a night in a van, playing a club for a pizza with no monitors, and we're still doing it when nobody gave a fuck. Joe Lestay with Bang Tango.
Right.
Chip and Donnie with Enough's Enough. Jason and Dangerous Toys.
Let me just
Rhino Buck.
I'll just quickly mention on Bang Tango, they actually have a documentary history of Bang Tango coming out in 2016, which you'll definitely want to check out.
Right. I've seen some trailers for that.
Right.
So, Rhino Bucket, and there was just so many bands that were really just, out there struggling, and I wanted to give them a place to be seen and heard. And then of course we talked about, the most obscure bands, the Johnny Crashes and the Slick Toxics and the Sleazebees and King of the Hill and Kick Tracy, and a lot of these people really went away. And the thing is, the internet was so new. Going back to Metal Edge, they used to have that little hotline column where you could call a band's hotline and listen to what they had to say. And at one point, Jerry had started an email column and a website column. So at one point early on, Nikki Sixx's email was in there, and
they all, a lot of them were,
yeah. So we're like, hey, let's send Nikki Sixx an email, and of course he didn't have, I'm sure, thousands and thousands of people contacting him. So when we shot him an email and he saw it and replied, Nikki ended up doing 3 interviews with us, and so did Tommy and a lot of other big stars, because it was new, and there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, no Instagram, no video, no Vimeo, none of that. And we were, essentially the first social networks for these kind of bands. And, we never thought it would make money.
But then you had to stay anonymous all this time, because a lot of folks were getting annoyed. Your Sebastian Bach, your Don Dawkins, your, Janie Lane, they were all, was that hard to stay anonymous and keep it under?
Yeah, it was, because, the thing is, when we originally did it, in looking back, there was a lot of thought that went into it. We thought about it for a month or two and worked on it before we actually launched it. And we both said, we're going to do this and our analogy was the masked magician. We were going to tell the secrets of the magic world on TV, but we'd wear a mask and show how these magicians actually did this trick. And then the audience goes, oh my God, really? That's fucking crazy. I would have never thought of that. And what we did is we were like, hey, and guess what? This guy in Disturbed, from Chicago, used to be a total glam fag, and check out his photos and his striped pants and his hair up to here. And now he's down with the sickness. So we wanted to, expose some parts of the industry and talk about certain things, but also do it anonymously, because I was in this industry and I obviously had more to quote unquote lose than Sean did at that point. But it wasn't like I was like, hey, I might get beat up if I go to the Key Club or the Rainbow, but it was just we wanted to, that was part of its allure. That was who's doing this,
Right, kind of like Kiss with the makeup in the
yeah, exactly, or the unknown comic who would come on stage and tell comedy all night with a paper bag over his head, So we kind of had this idea to just keep it anonymous, and it wasn't like, hey, in 5 years we're going to have 50,000 hits a day and be selling, $150,000 a year in merchandise. We never thought of any of that. We were just like, hey, if we're going to bag on Janie Lane or Sebastian Bach, probably not, let's do it as these little monikers, which was, then we created the names, the Janie Bon Neal and the Tammy Sex Slaughter, which I don't know who all heard this before, but that story, how that came about was when Tuff was signed to Atlantic, we were signed to Titanium, a subsidiary which was 4 partners, one of which was Andy Setcher from Hit Parader magazine. Right. And I was in New York City with the band. We were having dinner with Andy Setcher, we were talking about the magazine. And at one point I said, all your writers and employees and the people that do the reviews are, and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, who's, so, and he's like, I write all the articles, Stevie. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, you have a bunch of contributors. And he's like, no, he's like, I'm the writer. And I really wasn't sure what he was saying. And he goes, you know what I'll do is, he goes, let me explain this to you. I'm watching a baseball game because Andy was a big baseball fan, and he's writing a review of, say, an Ozzy record. And instead of signing it as Andy Setcher, he would take the first baseman's name, Pete Rose, and the pitcher, Raleigh Fingers, and go, Raleigh Rose. Yeah, this interview is written by Raleigh Rose. You know, first name of this guy and last name of that guy. And you know, it was just matter-of-factly, and then he went about eating a steak. So when we did Metal Sludge, me and Sean came up with, you know, hey, let's create these little identities. Janie Lane, John Bon Jovi, Vince Neil. Janie Bon Neil.
Let me just check one thing, though. So Hit Parader, which was Andy Setcher's thing, which ended up getting him in trouble with Guns N' Roses and Getting Your Ring and all that, was all just him?
I know there was a few people that actually really contributed. One of which
because I liked Hit Parader.
Right. Well, one of which was Ann Layton, which Ann is still around. Ann's been a writer forever. She would do like a column.
Right. She's a publicist now, I believe.
Yeah. Well, she's been that, you know, and Gear Talk with so-and-so from Metallica or whatever. Like, so there was a couple of contributors. As with Metal Edge, Jerry was that magazine. Jerry wrote most of those interviews and articles and
but they were very upfront about it. I mean, Metal Edge had Jerry's name everywhere. It's not like they were, I mean, I don't know if maybe some of the other names were her in disguise, but she was very
like Paul
upfront.
Gargano.
Paul.
Joking. No, but obviously Paul came in later and he was a contributor, but I don't think that Andy did that with every single article, but I would say that Andy, working in the industry as long as he did, and he got a record from a label or a band that he was paid to write or review, or, you know, the magazine was, and he was like, this is shit. And he wanted to say that, but didn't want to have another Axl scenario on his hand, said, okay, who wrote it? Raleigh Rose, you know? Well, I didn't write it. Fucking blame Raleigh, you know? So that's kind of where, you know, we came up with that idea with the contributors. I mean, the whole groupie column in the penis chart was Donna Anderson. And for the longest time, we'd have guys write us and send us pictures of their cocks in emails and wanted to, you know, I'm coming to LA, Don, I want to meet you. They weren't even grasping the fact that Donna Anderson was Donna D'Erico and Pamela Anderson, you know? And we had Bobby Brown's picture in there. So Donna Anderson was not a real girl. She was a fictitious Baywatch beauty that talked about...
do you still have all those pictures in a box under your bed?
No, but I'm sure that Sean probably has some hard drives or some CD-ROMs with a bunch of crazy sludge stuff on and historical content, and you know, we got some fun stuff over the years.
So, you know, as people were trying to figure out who was doing this, how was it going at Metal Sludge? Because eventually you and Sean split, right?
Right. Yeah, you know, I mean, like anything, we were doing this for years. I mean, 1 year, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. And, you know, then other stuff started coming up. MySpace and YouTube became new. And it just became, I mean, it was a lot of work. I mean, we made money and we had a lot of fun with it. And it was great to see it grow. But at the same time, we couldn't even really bask in it, because it's not like we could go and everybody could go, oh, dude, that's amazing what you did. Like, we couldn't get the pat on the back, you know? But not that we needed that, because it was great to just, for instance, go out to a club after something would happen on Metal Sludge, which we had weekly features, you know, 20 questions every week. I mean, over the years, we've interviewed like 500 rock stars and some of the biggest names ever, you know, and a lot of them gave great interviews, and we just posed questions that nobody else would have. Like, hey, tell us how bad this guy sucks on guitar on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a complete jackass and 10 being a god. How good are they? And some of the guys were like, fuck, he's a 2, he sucks, you know, and they'd like just unleash And then we'd put the interview up, and then of course they'd be on the road or they'd get hell through, whatever channels. And it really became a big deal there for a while. So going out and being that I lived here in LA and did go to certain events and venues, people would often talk about it. I'd see people in the shirts, and I'm supposed to go, oh, yeah, that was funny. I watched that earlier. Like, hey, yeah, cool. Where's the, let me get a soda. I got to get out of here. It was kind of like I'm playing to the crowd that I'm having fun and listening to it and giggling. But at the same time, the larger percentage of even my friends didn't know, or I should say acquaintances. Like some close friends knew, but there was a very small circle of people that really knew that it was me and Sean the whole time.
And by the way, I got to say, I'm glad that you finally copped to it, because for those early years, a lot of people kept saying, "Is it you, Mitch? Are you contributing?" And I was like, "No, I have nothing to do with it. I happen to read it. That's about it."
Well, and that's part of what I told, where me and Sean kind of started to split is just he was taking on a huge workload. We had other people involved.
Right, because Lit became big, and they started doing these massive tours in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and they were playing with like Sugar Ray, and Pamela Anderson was in their videos, and Sean was like, "Hey, I'm going to go on tour with Kid Rock and Sugar Ray and Lit and hang out with them instead of worrying about the next fucking 20 questions with King of the Hill."
Which, by the way, is fair enough. I mean, you're in the business to go on tour and make that money, and
right.
Sometimes your priorities, they have to shift. It's
Well, and people were starting to dig, and there was becoming, more and more internet, availability. I mean, like in the early in the mid late 90s when the internet was new, there wasn't as many people on. But when more people came around, it just became bigger, and it just became we needed more help, and we were getting contracts for advertisement with thousands of dollars in funds that, like we can't go to the bank and go, "Hi, I'm Bastard Boy Floyd. I need to cash this $5,000 check." We had to put a face and a name, a legitimate identity with the site,
And that's when people started searching.
Yeah, even registering the domains and having those accounts and, servers like, which, our server was in Canada. So we actually, there was so many steps, that were being taken, and Sean was learning how to like hide IP addresses and send emails where if we wrote somebody, it looked like we were writing them from China. And I mean, it's so funny looking back, and it's crazy that it was literally almost 20 years ago. It was, 17, 18 years ago when we started this. So, and, it was fun, and it's funny that, a lot of guys came to understand it. There was guys that hated it, then loved it, then hated it, or loved it, then hated it, and then came back and loved it again. And Sebastian Bach was one of the absolute first guys that ever wrote us. Right. And he wrote us and said, "You guys have huge balls. You're fucking awesome." And, same with Bobby Blotzer. Bobby Blotzer wrote us and said, "God, I'm glad I'm not Slaughter. Fuck," And so we had guys that really found it awesome and entertaining and hysterical when somebody else was getting sludged. But when, they got some sand kicked in their face, then it was wham, going home, and I don't want to play anymore.
Well, can we talk about some of those famous ones? Let's start off real quick with Blotzer, because I don't want to spend too much time on him, but he's out on tour with Ratt with 4 new guys. Let me just get your thought on that first. What do you think? Does everybody have the right to make a living in whatever means?
I mean, honestly, Ratt is one of the top 3 bands that influenced me to be what I'm doing today.
Right.
Motley Crüe, Van Halen, and Ratt. Absolutely.
And Ratt is fantastic.
I love Stephen Pearcy. I love the band. Stephen's become a friend. He sang on one of our records a couple years ago. He did backgrounds for me. I've met them all. I know them all. Blotzer is the guy that's just, he's a loudmouth. He's abrasive. He tells it like it is. He's not afraid, to have that confrontation with anybody. And at the end of the day, he does have the right to work, and, it's funny. when Warren filed the suit and said, hey, these imposters are going out as Ratt, and then Bobby went, hold it, imposters? What about Robbie Crane and Kerry Kelly and John Corabi? They weren't imposters?
And Jizzy Pearl.
And Jizzy Pearl. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, Bobby's got a point there. Yes. We did an article, and I've busted Bob's balls. And as much as I busted his balls, I don't want to say we're friends, but we're absolutely acquaintances. You know, if I seen him right now, I'd say hi. We'd probably chat. I mean, he's texted me. We've talked on the phone. And when the whole Juan thing happened a few months ago, I posted some stuff about Juan's band. Juan's a sweetheart. I love Juan.
Absolutely.
Bobby calls me up. He's freaking out. I'm going to sue you. He's like screaming at me on the phone about Juan. He's like, what are you doing with Juan? You and Juan are involved in cohorts to do this. And I'm like, dude, I have nothing to do with fucking Juan's Ratt. I'm posting an article about it. You know, it's not my band. But, you know, Bobby was just furious. At the end of the day, his band sounds really good. The kid can sing his ass off.
Yep.
He absolutely can sing his ass off. The videos, he sounds great. The band sounds awesome. Good for them, you know?
Yeah. And to also be clear on the legal point, and I know it's not as interesting.
Right.
A president of a corporation does have what they call a fiduciary duty to shareholders to make money and to generate revenue.
Yep.
And he's absolutely right when he says, listen, when we're sitting at home, we're not generating revenue. We're breaching our duty. So it's unfortunate that it's not the original guys, but it can't always be the original guys. And I wish fans would understand that, you know.
You know, and there's obviously other, you know, examples, Foreigner, Journey, you know, I mean, certain guys.
Which is, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Foreigner, because when you mention Skid Row, when you mention Kiss, when you mention, people freak out all over the place, and you mentioned Foreigner, and I saw them like 3 times last year, twice without any original members. They sounded great. Nobody says anything. They just go, hey, I saw Foreigner
Kelly
tonight.
is killing it. And what guy could do, I mean, he fits that band. He
is that band.
Kelly was a great singer before. And, you know, for him to get that gig, it's amazing. I mean, he sounds great. And
he saved the band. I mean, people always say, Vinnie Vincent saved Kiss. Yeah, bullshit. Kelly saved Foreigner. That you can't deny.
Well, you know what's kind of weird? This is kind of sidebar, but tribute bands. There's all these tribute bands over the last 10 or 15 years, which people have become really pissed off about. I mean, it was Cold Gin that really, I think, pushed Gene and Paul to go, hang on, we need to put the makeup back on. I was at some of those shows. I was at the Troubadour in 1994, 95, when Paul and Gene were there. The Troubadour doesn't hold more than 300 people. I mean, Paul and Gene were on a balcony like 20 feet from the stage, and Tommy Thayer, oddly enough, playing guitar, and Jamie St. James was playing drums. I mean, those guys, Chris McLaren from Saigon Kick, I think was Gene. Those guys were fucking amazing. But what's weird is, back in the early mid-'80s, when we were all playing around, what tributes were there? Elvis, the Beatles, maybe a Jimi Hendrix tribute because he was already dead.
There was
obviously.
A lot of
Elvis
ABBA tributes.
Was dead. You know, John Lennon was already dead. So when people decided to go, we're going to be a Motley Crue tribute, or we're going to be a Metallica tribute, or Dee Schneider, when he was doing White Widow and playing in front of, 300 people with Tuff opening in Texas, and then he went home to New York, and there was a Twisted Sister tribute that played on Long Island and sold out a 1,800-seat theater, and he went to the show and went, really? That guy's fucking me right now. He's wearing my stage clothes. They're singing my songs. And they got almost 2,000 people here. And I just got them playing in front of 240 people the other night, bleeding my guts on the stage. So eventually the tributes had to catch up with the times. I mean, not as of, in 48 hours, not even 36 hours, Motley Crue's over.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to come out and do the best, not that there's not already some good ones, because there is, but somebody's going to come out with the best Shout at the Devil tribute ever, and eventually there's...
Or Motley Crue, the Broadway musical.
Right. So, the tribute bands, and even the guys that are dying. I mean, Janie Lane, he can't come back to Warren. Kevin can't come back to Quiet Riot. There's certain guys that they can't be there. Robin Crosby can't play guitar in Ratt, even if the other 4 guys wanted to get back together. So I get it, and there's a lot of those. Kiss is one of the biggest examples, and Van Halen was. When David Lee Roth left Van Halen, everybody was like,
this time?
No, I'm talking about like in 1985 or 86.
Right.
I'm like, really? That's insane. But then Sammy came in, and it really worked. And they really should have just called the band Van Hagar, which everybody called them anyways. It was like Van Halen and Van Hagar. That old catalog is amazing, and the Hagar catalog was awesome as well.
Yeah.
Not as many records, but I think when it came to actual sales or maybe even hits, they might have had higher charting records, because in the 70s I don't think the labels even knew what they had for the first 3 or 4 years with Van Halen.
Yeah, and they didn't have the MTV and the radio. There was also different media times too.
When Motley Crüe decided that Vince wasn't going to be their singer, it was mind-boggling. And it was also mind-boggling to me as a kid from Oshkosh that grew up on them, and they put out this magazine, some publisher did, and listed like the top 5 or 6 possibilities to replace Vince. Not that Motley Crüe ever picked, but at one point I ended up on, page 2 of that with a photo this big, Stevie Rachelle of Tuff, and I was like, the fact that I was even thought of by the industry as one of the top possible replacements for Vince Neil of Motley Crüe was pretty mind-blowing to me. And John, unbelievable singer, but we don't hear John sing Livewire.
Right. No, we don't. He has a connection to Tuff too, right?
I've known John since the second day I moved here. And he played one show with us, which was like, he played guitar for me, lead guitar, because Daryl Roberts had quit because he was getting the gig in Wasp. And we were supposed to play a couple more shows, and he was already in the band for not quite a year. Daryl actually was the guitarist on American Hair Band when I kind of relaunched the band. That was the end of 2000, early 2000.
That was a great song. And of course, John Corabi, for those watching, has a Motley Crüe 94 live album coming out in 2016. That'll be fun to listen to.
I mean, that record is amazing, but
it should have been called something else. Yeah,
just like Van Hagar should have been something else, I mean,
though they got away with it. People bought into it being Van Halen, but they didn't buy it. They didn't buy the Motley Crüe thing. But I think maybe it was the time, and it was the Nirvana, and the whole media attention had shifted.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's just like I equated.
It probably would have died with Vince. Quite frankly,
I equated it to this at one point. I was like, you know what? This sounds really gnarly, but there was a point where it was almost like, if you were in a hair band, it was almost like you were HIV positive. I mean, when people found out you were in a hair band, the labels, the producers, I mean, the studios, everybody was just like, I mean, by the mid-90s, if you didn't have dreadlocks or a weird beard, or a bald head, or you weren't a little overweight with some dirty, quote unquote, roadie looking shorts on, God forbid, and Steel Panther came around at the end of the 90s and said, fuck all you guys. We're putting on spandex. We're going to go to the Viper Room and do choreography and sing You Give Love a Bad Name. And now that band is, globally as big as probably almost every single band from the genre, and probably half of those from the 90s, outside of about 20 or 30 acts. I mean, they are that big. And so it's funny how all things come in circles and go around. And
well, let's talk about things coming in circle, because yesterday they talked about this Guns N' Roses reunion. What's your take on the whole thing? It seems to be happening, right?
Yeah, I've heard it, God.
For months.
Yeah, and I do know some people, and we're not going to name names, and you know some people.
Of course.
But I've heard some really, 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 I don't want to say rumors. I've heard some people tell me some pretty gnarly stuff. And, here's the part that gives away more than anything, is there's no denials coming from within the real camp. And it's not like Axl's going to go on Twitter today and go, what are you guys talking about? That's not true. He's a man of few words. I mean, Axl does updates on Twitter about a lost cat, or part of Malibu being on fire, or some you know Saudi Arabian prince. Like he doesn't have a given world about what everybody on social networks thinks about his band or others. But the fact that within the camp there hasn't been any refuting of what's being told, and the website being cleaned, and original logos, and it's just for anybody that thinks it's not happening. I think, unless we're all
lack of denial is always the easiest. I mean, you had Slash that was on tour in the fall, doing media days all over the place. It was easy for him to just say, "Oh, by the way, that's not true. That never happened." Axl's office could. There's lack of denial is the number one hint out of all these stories. So it would have been easy. Tony Harnell last night announces that he's left Skid Row. Where do you think that leaves us? Is Stevie Rachelle joining Skid Row?
No, for the love of God. I don't have that voice. I mean, so I can admit that. But I have a better voice than most people think I do. True. It's weird. I mean, God, I know some of those guys, and I've heard some things from them direct, but at the end of the day, we know that Axl loves Sebastian. Axl's brought Sebastian on countless tours as a solo artist. Not only has he brought him on tour, but there's only a handful of guys that Axl's ever let stand on stage with him and sing. I mean, outside of Kid Rock and maybe the guy from Rose Tattoo, I mean, Sebastian's been on stage with Axl endless times, and probably almost every night he's opened for him, Axl brought him out to do a song or two. And so we know they have a friendship that goes deep, and the Skids guys, if Guns N' Roses can bury their differences, why can't Skid Row? And everybody says about Sebastian the way he is or the way he acts, and it's part of what makes him who he is. I mean, he is undoubtedly, or was, I can't say is. I mean, when he came out, he had the voice and the look and the hair and the personality, and some guys live and breathe and die it, like Lemmy. I mean, he's the epitome of what rock and roll was. And Sebastian Bach is that same guy. I don't think he's going to drink as much or smoke as much. He's a little bit more concerned with his voice. But I think Sebastian Bach running Skid Row would be, it would be great. It would be great for the band. As far as not wanting to get, be in the same room with the guy or on the same bus with him 24 hours a day. I mean, at that level, they don't have to be.
Right. But say what you will about Sebastian Bach, or people can say what they will. He's always been very professional in delivering his shows. You go to a Skid Row show or Sebastian Bach show, he's always on, and he's always giving you 110%. He never calls it in, so you've got to give him credit there.
Yep.
And now, do you think that it would be a double reunion tour, two reunited bands on the same bill? Is that even conceivable?
I mean, I don't know. If Guns N' Roses is going to go play stadiums, I mean, they're not going to take out any other 80s band. They're just not, And I don't believe that the fan base would want some totally obscure,
like Degeneration opening for Kiss.
Yeah, or like, whatever trendy hip, band is. I think Guns N' Roses had them on. They're from Vegas. They had a couple of big songs in the last few years. I'm drawing a blank on their name.
Well, they had Danko Jones from Canada, but you got to love Danko. He's a good guy.
There's a lot of bands that have good content and can deliver. But if people are going to come to see a Guns N' Roses reunion, they're going to want to hear a specific set of music. Welcome to Appetite for Destruction and Use Your Illusion, and that's what they're going to get. And Patience off the EP. So, again, because of Axl's friendship with Sebastian, which it seems like they've had it for a long time, I think that Skid Row with Sebastian playing in front of Guns N' Roses, and then have your opener, give somebody 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
And it sort of also brings us back to the Illusion tour, because Skid Row was opening for them at the
Yeah,
time.
exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, Motley Crue is ending, and Guns N' Roses is.
Do you think Motley Crue is really ending? I have a sense that they will never tour, and do 40 nights. But I think they might show up at a Super Bowl or at a corporate gig or at.
I don't know. I mean,
I just get a sense that it's not over. I think they'll do one-offs and just say, hey, we're doing these special events. Like, who wouldn't want to play the Super Bowl? Or
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, Nicky's got 6 a.m. and he's got himself, a project there. And
it's a good project.
Tommy.
It's got EDM.
He so badly doesn't want to be there, which is kind of gross. It's like, dude, it's like, I think the meet and greets they've been doing for the last 2 years, it's only Mick and Vince and Nicky, and, he doesn't want to do them. And I mean, but then again, we're not those guys,
But his reasoning was good, though. He said, I don't think we should be charging fans to shake our hand.
Right.
Which,
right.
I sort of agree with.
I mean, it's a yes and no for me because, I've never charged at a meet and greet, but I'm not that person, but I've heard stories I had some friends that recently, 6 months ago, saw Sebastian Bach and they were doing, there was a paper sign on his bus that said meet and greet, $150. And then there was a video that was uploaded on YouTube and Sebastian, brought each person on the bus, gave them each, I don't know, a minute or two. They took some photos. He had some big colored posters and he signed them and it was all good. And he was very personable with them. But then I talked to some people that were at some of those shows and stood outside the bus and were next to him and then at one point said something to him. And he looked at him and was as cold and crass as could be to say, you didn't pay for the meet and greet. And like, just ignored them like they were like a block, like a block of wood, like get away from me. And I thought that was kind of lame, He was talking to the people that were at the meet and greet after he came off the bus, but the persons, the people that didn't pay said something to him and he like barked in the chick's face, you didn't pay for the meet and greet. And I was like, well, that's kind of gross. But again, Sebastian Bach, he said something recently I thought was great. He goes, my life is a fucking meet and greet. I mean, being the guy he is and the way he looks and going to the Beverly Hills Mall or, to a McDonald's, he's a recognizable guy. And he's probably signed and shook hands and took pictures with just hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people that, never paid a penny, but probably had his records. So I get the meet and greets. I understand how it works,
Yeah, so there you go. Do you think we'll see Sammy Hagar back with Van Halen at some point?
I have no idea. I mean, it seems like, Sammy said some pretty gnarly stuff about Eddie and the band, but at the end of the day, money talks. It really does.
Axl called Slash a cancer, and Rachel Bolan has certainly said some things about Sebastian and the guys in the Eagles, and Gene Simmons with Ace Frehley. I mean,
right?
Come on, and Vince and Tommy for the longest time hated each other openly, right? So.
Right.
Just because somebody said something gnarly doesn't mean that it's undoable or money talks, right? So,
yeah.
What's next for Tuff? Are you going to do some shows? I know that there's a promoter in Ottawa that's been begging to get you, but other than that, are you heading out anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Tuff is not a full-time gig. It's one of about 5 projects I do, and Tuff is, we play 20 shows a year, maybe 25. And I always try to anchor it around, anchor a weekend around M3 or Monsters of Rock or the Cat House Live or Rock and Skull. And in 2016, we're going to play Rock and Skull. We're going to go on the Monsters of Rock West Coast Monsterwood Tour, which is, I think, in October. There's a couple other things. These events that happen, it's good for us, even if we play a side stage at 2 o'clock. And then I play a couple of clubs around it. Try to get to Europe once every year and a half or 2 years. My friend Alex and Shameless over there, Alex, obviously.
Right. And Shameless. By the way, Shameless has put out great CDs over the years.
A lot of people don't know that. We've put out 6 CDs, and I've sang on all of them. It's usually myself singing 3 or 4 songs, and Steve Summers of Pretty Boy Floyd singing 3 or 4. And when Alex put that together 15 years ago...
I've got a Shameless CD that I'm holding up for people to see right there. This one is called Beautiful Disaster. There you go.
That's the most recent one. It's great. One of the biggest selling one was Queen for a Day, which
Queen for a Day is brilliant. Brilliant album.
Which the song is actually a Steve Summers song, but it's the biggest hit that they had. When we play in Europe, it's equivalent to what a Tuff, Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, or Pretty Boy Floyd show would be in the United States. 150 people, sometimes it's 200. Occasionally we've done a couple of festivals where it was like a few thousand, played with Hardcore Superstar and some of these bands over there. And I got to say that the Shameless thing is great. It's been Alex on bass and BC, Boris on guitar. These guys are born and raised in Munich, Germany. They're as German as you can get. And we've done tours where I was just the singer. There's been tours where it was just Steve Summers as the singer. And then we've done a few tours where we both went. And then what we would do is if I'm singing, I will sing 3 or 4 of the Shameless songs from the catalog that I recorded with the band. And then I'll play 3 or 4 Tuff songs. And then if Summers would play, he would do 3 or 4 of the songs he sang on the Shameless records and 3 or 4 Pretty Boy Floyd songs. So the fans in Europe get to see Stevie and, hear some Tuff music. They get to see Steve and hear some Pretty Boy Floyd music. And, now we've done, like I said, 6 studio records since 1999, I think. And, we could play a full set of Shameless. That's all good stuff. But people want to hear, Good Guys Wear Black and I Kissing Goodbye, or Steve's There. They want to hear 48 Hours to Rock and I Want to Be With You. And it's a great project, and it's a lot of fun, and it's helped me go to, 12, 15, almost 20 countries all over Europe, and it's a good thing. It's like a second band there,
Was Steve Sex Summers ever involved in Metal Sludge? Was he a columnist or no?
Nope. It was me and Sean, a guy named James Saki, Jim Bob Dwarf out of Indiana. At one point was a big fan and a contributor. But he was also
Killer Dwarves fan too.
Yeah, huge Killer Dwarves fan. That's why his nickname was Jim Bob Dwarf. But he was very knowledgeable about computers and designing websites. And so at one point he just started he was a fan, a sludgeaholic or whatever you wanted to call it. We, named like a fan a month and what they said and did about how they liked the site or music. And then he's like, hey, I can help your site look better if you do this or that. And then we'd be like, well, what did you mean by that? And it was something to do with the holidays. He goes, well, for Christmas, I could make snowflakes appear on the screen, and we could have the gorilla putting the star on top of the Christmas tree in the top corner, or the little snow gorilla, And we're like, well, how does all that work? And he goes, I'll send you a sample. So then he would send us like a file and show us what it looked like. And we were like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so he had a lot of knowledge that way. And at one point, me and Sean were just like, should we give him the passwords? Should we let him do it? Is he a mole? Is he going to evaporate and eviscerate our site?
Destroy the site, yeah.
Yeah, but he wasn't, And so after we learned to trust him, he became involved to really help us. And he was also a guy that was reviewing CDs, and he was going to shows, as were other guys like Tollywood in Minneapolis, some guy. And there was other fans that would say, we started using our fans. They're like, hey, I'm going to see Warrant or Janie Lane solo or Quiet Riot in concert. And we're like, really? Where? And they're like, oh, in such and such a Missouri or Kansas City. We're like, okay, here, print these out. Go ask them these questions and record it. So we would send, some unknowing, fan, boy, girl, fat guy, sexy chick, whatever. And they'd show up and go, hey, I'm here for Metal Sludge. I need to talk to Janie Lane, And then we'd get interviews like that, And then they'd send us the recordings back or whatever, and we'd transcribe it. And so it was a lot of fun. And so over the years, there was also a lot of contributors. Scott Ian was a big fan. Jizzy Pearl at some points contributed some random notes, and people just give us their 2 cents, and we pitted guys against each other. If we were going to interview Phil Lewis, we would email Tracy Guns and say, hey, what can we ask Phil? And he'd be like, oh, on the down low, ask him this, And then we would do the same and ask Phil the same about Tracy if we were going to interview him. So, we kind of had fun with it. And, over the years, I think everybody came to realize it. Kevin DeBro said it after, I'd come out. He came up to me and he's looking at me, shaking his head. and smiling, and he put out his hand. He goes, Stevie, I want to shake your hand. He goes, you gave everybody a kick in the ass that we all deserved. And he goes, fucking love you. And a lot of guys did that, you know. But Kevin, as you know, was very, you know, he was the real deal. And, you know, so there was guys that came to realize what Metal Sludge stood for. And over the years, you know, I think we helped a lot of bands in a time when there was nobody giving a fuck about them.
Well, I gotta say, if it wasn't for Metal Sludge, I never would have heard of Sleazebees. So, so you know, Canada had a very different take on the hair metal. If it wasn't Rat or Poison or something that was at such a level that it could be played on much music, it just didn't exist, right? So, but no, I think Metal Sludge has done a lot for the scene. But you know, in 98, 99, 2001, when things weren't really going so well, you kept those names alive, and you kept people saying, "Hey, you're right. You know, Quiet Riot is in Wisconsin this week. Let's go check them out." And I think that contributed to the scene hanging around and still being here in 2015. Quite frankly,
we connected people, and we were, you know, like I said, we were essentially the first social networks for people that like this kind of music.
Board, right? The famous
I mean, and we still have it. You know, we had these chat rooms, and people, you know, started sharing friendship, like you said, talk about obscure. There's a lot of people that didn't know who Slick Toxic was, you know, a great Canadian band, or Wild Side, or, you know, and a lot of people didn't know, okay, well, this guy from this band used to be that guy in that band. And, you know, being from LA, I had just archives of old magazines that we unearthed, pictures of Slayer, you know, in 1981 or 82, when they were absolutely like, they weren't glam, but they were, you know, they were wearing spandex. We have pictures of Kerry King in striped spandex, looking as faggy as anybody. So
that was one of my favorite features on Metal Sludge, was looking at the old pictures
exposed.
And going, exposed, and I was like, oh my god, look at him. And yeah, that was the great one. And
Nikki Sixx is like 8th grade photo, and he's wearing wire rim glasses, and Sean's caption underneath it was one simple line: shout at the devil. And Nikki looked like such a geek. It was like, really? That's just amazing that's Nikki Sixx. And it was, you know, and Axl, like, looked like Opie from like the Andy Griffith Show with his little red hair and his bangs. And
and I'll ask you just to say a few words on a couple of the members that went through. You had Kerry Kelly, now of course with Night Ranger. Gotta love Kelly, great guitars. He did Alice Cooper. Still a friend of yours?
Oh, absolutely. When you say had a couple, meaning they played with me.
Right, played with Tuff.
Yeah, Kerry did a few shows with us, and it was basically, we were getting ready to go to Europe, to go to Budapest, Hungary, to play a thing called Powerfest. Scorpions, Tommy Lee, all kinds of like Monster Magnet. This was in 2003, and we were going to use George DeSaint, our original guitar player, but his passport, he couldn't get it renewed. So we were like on the cusp of having to like leave in a few days. And Kerry was going to be there, I think, with Rat and Adler's Appetite, which at the time I think was called like Suki Jones or something. And so, you know, Robbie Crane I said, dude, I need a guitar player. He's like, why don't you just use Kerry? You know, and Kerry he's an amazing guitar player, and not even a great person, but he's also very knowledgeable about music and production, and he knows his way around an instrument big time. As a matter of fact, the first time he came to rehearse with us, I gave him a couple records, said, these are 10 songs to learn. He showed up, he opened up a guitar case, and he opened up a file folder, put on his guitar, and he had all our music charted on paper. It wasn't like D-A-C. I mean, it was literally charted music notes. And I was like, really? You know, and he played through it like butter. He'd like look at the notes, like, what's next? You know? And I mean, I was blown away at how good he was, you know, and which I knew he was good, but you know, he played with us a couple of shows. Corabi once filled in a couple shows. Daryl Roberts played with me for probably about 9 months. He was a guy. I was going to ask
you about Daryl. He did Wasp, then he did Five Finger Death Punch, which has become this huge band.
I've known Daryl since the beginning, when he came to LA, and he originally came here to audition for Megadeth, and didn't get it. But he was in a couple local bands, and he was a singer, guitar player, always good. Then he played in a Metallica tribute band called Alcoholica, which got to be pretty big in the end of the 90s. And when
one of the best tribute bands ever, quite frankly.
Yeah, when they really took off is when then Fred Durst did a Limp Bizkit tour and was anti-Napster or anti-Metallica because of the whole Napster thing. He brought Alcoholica out as the opening band. And then every night, Fred would come out and introduce Alcoholica as the opener. So I knew Daryl, and at one point when I was going to put Tuff back together in 2000, it was going to be called Tuff Y2K, because everything was Y2K at that point. Of course. I don't know why the fuck I thought it would be cool.
Even Queensryche had, I think it was Q2K or something like that, an album.
So he ended up becoming my guitar player. We recorded American Hair Band, played about probably 30 shows with him, including a little Midwest East Coast tour. And then Stet Howland and Mike Duda came to one of our shows, and they knew him, but they had never really seen him play lead guitar. And he's kind of like a, old school Zakk Wylde, And they were like, "Oh my God, he rips!" And then they went to Blackie, and they were looking for a guitar player. And then 2 days later, he was getting, where he was going to go into Wasp. And then he kind of hung me out to dry, and I needed a guitarist, and that's when Corabi filled in. And then at one point after that, I got Michael Thomas involved, which he wasn't really a fit for our band. And I remember when he first showed up, I was like, "Dude, you should probably be in Beautiful Creatures." But, I need to, we're playing with Vince Neil this week, and we did a show with Jackal in the Midwest. And so Michael played with me. And then it was like a couple months later, DJ Ashba quit Beautiful Creatures. And we played the Key Club with the Bullet Boys. And as we're playing, Tuff, and I have Michael Thomas playing guitar, there's Anthony Fox and Joel Estee and Kenny Queens and the guys in Beautiful Creatures in the Key Club watching us. And then they were talking to him, and they kind of knew him, but that was that was his live audition. And then the next day he called me. He was like, "Dude, I think I'm going to be the new guitarist in Beautiful Creatures." So,
which, by the way, was a big band at the time. They had a lot of buzz. Unfortunately, they couldn't sustain it. They did Ozfest. They did all that stuff. They really thought it was like the second coming, and then I don't know what happened, label politics for the band, or it just vanished. And it's too bad, because that first album is brilliant. And I'll finish on this one, just a personal friend. Adam Hamilton spent some time with LA Guns as well. One of the nicest people you could ever meet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Adam played drums for me in 1995 on one of the last Tuff tours. I had already known Adam for a few years because he had played with Joey C. Jones and the Glory Hounds. And they had opened for Tuff a couple times. And then he was playing with C.C. DeVille in Needle Park. And then I remember... I don't know. I called a couple people. Michael didn't want to go on, or no, Jimmy had left the band. Michael had already been out of the band a couple years, and I needed a drummer. I was calling people like Anthony Fox. He said no, and this was pre-Beautiful Creatures. After he was like, he was in Wayne's World and played in Tommy Gun, and he was like a local guy that did pretty good. He was in Jones Street as well, but Anthony said no. I asked Rachel Bitch from Legs Up. They were from Ohio. He said no. And then I called Adam, and I'm like, "Dude, I need a drummer for like the next 2 months." And we came up with a plan, and I don't know, paid him $500 a week. And he was like, "I want to go on the road." And he did. And he was fucking great. I mean, he wasn't the style of drummer that fits Tuff. An amazing drummer. I mean, way more technically, and more finesse. But he killed it. We had a fucking blast. And we remained friends over the years. And then he ended up producing some singles that I recorded with Deadline Cleopatra. And then at one point I had him produce one of the Veins of Jenna records. And then I got him involved with Alex to do a couple of the Shameless records. And now he's recently done some solo stuff with me. And yeah, Adam's great. I love Adam. And let's not forget Billy Morris. Billy, you obviously know who Billy is, right, Mitch? Hello, I think I'm losing you. Or did I lose you?
No. I'm still here. I turned off the mic while I was reaching for something.
Okay.
I'll just quickly mention Adam before we move on to Billy. For folks who don't know, he played a gig or a couple of gigs with Dokken on drums. So head over to YouTube and look up Adam Hamilton Dokken, because he basically had to learn the entire set
in an hour.
Backstage
in the dressing room, because the drummer got
sick, food poisoning or something.
Yeah, Mick Brown, they had to take him to the hospital. And they basically, Adam was playing bass in LA Guns, and somebody said backstage, and
we have to cancel the show.
No, have Adam play. Adam's a drummer.
Right.
And I think Don and them were like, really? And he killed it.
Yeah.
He killed it.
From I heard the story a little differently. I heard that they were going to cancel, and he said, "Don't cancel. I know your fucking set. I've been watching it every night for 3 months."
Right.
But there you go. And then, of course, you were mentioning Billy Morris. Billy went out with Warrant for many, many years. Now owns a club, I believe, in Ohio?
No. He actually sold the club, but he owns a food truck with Todd Chase on called... God, I'm bored.
Eat Here.
Yeah, they have
Cherry Pie.
They have a food truck that's doing great. They just started it. But no, Billy played with Warrant for many years, with Janie Solo. He did a few shows with Quiet Riot, and he also played with Paul Gilbert as the second guitarist in some solo stuff that Paul had done in like Japan and Korea or Thailand or something like that. But Billy is, the king of Ohio. Like people know that Jason McMasters is the mayor of Austin, Texas. I mean, he's just all rock and roll for Texas. That's what Billy is for Ohio. I've known Billy for years. He's had the club that all the bands played at. He's played in these bands, and he's always been the local legend of the greater Cleveland area. And Billy's been playing guitar with me and Todd Chase for the last few years. And he did a show with me about 10 years ago, too, like a New Year's Eve thing. But Billy's amazing. He's great. I love him. Todd Chase, the founder and original bassist, is back in the band. And we've got a couple different drummers we've been using. Todd T. Burr off and on for 10 or 15 years. And Jimmy Lord, who played in Tuff during the Fist First Religious Fix era, he's been playing some shows with us off and on as well. So we have a good little lineup, and we'll probably play 20 or 25 shows next year and just keep chugging along. A little bit of Sludge, a little bit of Tuff, a little bit of Shameless, and that's it.
And that's it, and that's all. And there you go. So we'll look forward to, we'll tell people to pick up Decadation. Let me just show it to them once again. There it is. Mm-hmm. It is definitely worth picking up. And of course, we've got Tuff, the Glam Years, which is another one worth picking up.
Yep.
There you go, the Glam Years.
Yep.
And thank you, Stevie. And of course, head over to metalsludge.tv. Or
.com or metal-sludge.com. All of the domains go to the same place, and just use your Google browser, Tuff with TUF, with two Fs, TUFF, or Metal Sludge, and you can find us. And I thank everybody from Mitch Lafon's world for
checking this out.
Checking in. And just so everybody knows, Mitch asked me the other day, how's 10 a.m. my time? And I was like, that's 7 a.m. in Los Angeles. I'm not exactly the late sleeper, but I don't know if I can be ready at 7, but it's still pretty early in the morning.
Right.
And I only got up a couple hours ago, so.
Well, hey, come on. Why not? Anything for rock and roll. And we'll see what 2016 brings. It certainly seems to me that it's going to be 1986 all over again. We've got Guns N' Roses, most likely. David Lee Roth with Eat 'Em and Smile, most likely. Mm-hmm. Skid Row, who knows? Van Halen, who knows? There's a lot of who knows, but if you were around in 1986, I think you're really going to like 2016.
Yep.
So. Yeah,
it's good. It's shaping up to be a crazy new year, and a lot of stuff happening. And rip to Lemmy. Yeah. And I'm excited for the GNR news, and I could only hope that Sebastian could patch up with Skid Row. That'd be great.
That'd be great, because listen, again, all the stuff people say about Sebastian, he delivers live. He has never put on a gig where he's just called it in, so we'll give him that.
Delivering the goods.
Delivering the goods. That's right. Now go check out that video with Sebastian and Judas Priest from, I guess, Headbangers Ball of '92.
Thank you very much, Mitch.
Thank you, Stevie.
And we'll talk down the road, buddy. Love you.
Absolutely.